Hi, if you want to watch exclusive content with hot girls that you won't watch on YouTube, namely where Naruto roasts Kushina and Mikoto and many other hot girls without restrictions, then visit my Boosty channel at the link in the description.
As always, if you want to watch the second season, I ask you to give it a lot love to this video in the form of subscription, like and comment. Now without more to add, enjoy. Prologue: What is a shinobi? People ask themselves this question, and the answer is almost never the same. Some will say that a shinobi is a perfect killing machine, a monster that pulls. He would never question his superior's orders, and that he should kill without mercy. Others would disagree, stating that a shinobi is one who protects the weak and innocent without caring about his own life. There are an infinite number of unique definitions and opinions. However, none is intrinsically right or wrong. A shinobi cannot be defined simply. A shinobi uses the energy known as chakra. The chakra has existed in the world for a long time. According to legends, its origin dates back to when a princess named Otsutsuki Kagaya ate the forbidden fruit from the Shinju tree with the intention of stopping all wars, thus becoming a goddess. His sons Agoromo and Amura inherited his power, and when the princess's mind was corrupted by him, they sealed her on the moon. After a long battle, Otsutsuki Agoromo was considered a god. People called him the Sage of the Six Paths. His powers were passed down to his children and his lineage. The sage spread his teachings about the chakra, known as ninsu, which helped people understand each other and minimized the need for violence. However, ironically, his teachings were perverted and transformed into ninjutsu, which was almost always used to provoke violence. After a time of interclan wars, the rival Uchiha and Senju clans founded the first hidden village. Many other clans joined, and the village was named Kanawagakure, the village hidden among the leaves. Subsequently, 4 other main villages were established, giving rise to the 5 great nations. 3 major ninja wars have been fought so far. The first ended with an armistice, but left the big 5 countries badly damaged. The treaty led to a period of peace, but after about 20 years, economic inequality between them became a serious problem. Nations began to form factions and, under the pretext of defending their rights, began to use military force to expand their territories. Thus began the Second Great War. The conflict spread from the Second to the Third War, almost without pause, which had ended just over a year ago. Namikaze Minato was a tall, blonde man. He remained silent as he watched the beast destroy his village. In her arms she was carrying a small bundle, my son. Minato was a war hero. He played a fundamental role in the end of the Third World War, practically alone. Minato was appointed the 4th Hokage following the retirement of the 3rd Hokage, almost a year after the latter retired. At the end of World War III, he was supposed to be the strongest man in the village. The Hokage had a duty to protect her. But as a father and husband, he couldn't be sure he could save his family that night. He watched the monster, no, the beast, causing senseless destruction, and noticed that it suddenly stopped moving, with golden chains holding its huge 300-meter-high structure. The beast was crushed to the ground, staring intently in front of itself. Kushina, his wife, was not even close to giving up, despite having recently given birth to their son. As he stared intently into the beast's eyes, they were attacked right after she gave birth to her beautiful daughter. A man wearing a yellow mask suddenly appeared and kidnapped the girl. "Stay away from the Hinchiriki, or the child will die," the man had said. He was clearly an Uchiha. His Sharingan was shining through the hole in the mask. Minato managed to save his son, but the man kidnapped his wife and forcibly extracted the Kyuubi inside her. Normally, when the tailed beast is extracted, its Hinchiriki dies instantly. But thanks to Uzumaki's vitality and sheer willpower, he was still alive, albeit by a hair's breadth. The Uchihas are part of the village of La Hoya. Why attack your own home? What do they intend to achieve? That's what the man laughed with a grave voice. It's none of your business, 4th Hokage. And you won't even care, because you'll die today. I promise you that. The man used a strange teleportation ability, and Minato was having a hard time connecting his attacks. But a single blow was enough to injure him. enough to push him back. As expected from the yellow lightning, you are really the fastest. You may have defeated me, but the QB will be mine one day. And then he left. Minato teleported next to his wife, coming out of his state of shock. Kushina, are you okay? Minato. I can't contain him much longer. He was breathing hard. We have to seal it inside me. I'm dying already, I'll take this bastard with me. Minato's face was grim. I knew it was a bad idea. Even if it works, the QB will regenerate in a few years. Konoha will lose him, and the balance of power will be severely altered. Besides, we can't let it fall into the hands of that masked man. He said to his wife, who turned her head sharply to glare at him. You better not be planning on doing what I think you're doing. I will never forgive you if you do this to our son. Not after my son, and he stopped abruptly mid-sentence as he saw the pain on Minato's face. Her first child, a precious boy, passed away hours after he was born. They were devastated and never fully recovered from his death. However, they wanted to try again, but it seemed that fate would not allow them to spend more than a few hours with any of their children. I was angry, frustrated, and very sad. Hinshiriki were almost always despised by people. It was something that parents couldn't burden their children with. But deep down, Kushina knew that her husband was right. They had no choice but to trust that their daughter would be strong enough to overcome it. His face was soaked in sweat and tears, and his legs were shaking, but he did not let go of the chains that bound the beast. Minato looked into her eyes and begged. He was my son too, I loved him too. I don't want to do this any more than you do, but it's the only way and you know it too. Turning your back on your village and your country is as bad as abandoning your daughter, Kushina. You should understand that. You saw how your own country was falling apart. Have a little faith. After all, she is our daughter. Kushina looked defeated. She looked at the bundle he was holding in his arms. Just let me hold her one more time. I want to see his face one more time before I die. Minato turned his gaze towards the crying baby and nodded silently. As soon as he held her in his arms, the baby stopped crying, as if she knew she was in her mother's embrace, and smiled beaming. He had a pale face with 6 marks of whiskers, red hair and blue eyes. He inherited his mother's hair, but his father's eyes. Kushina also laughed, her softly, while crying. Minato observed the scene with solemnity, and then glared at the beast, which was starting to stand up. Invocation Jutsu. A gigantic toad, carrying a bit and smoking a pipe, appeared in a big cloud of smoke and crashed into the fox. Giant. Gamabunta. It prevents the beast from rising, while I prepare to seal it. For once, Gamabunta observed the scene and did not question anything. The Okage invoked an altar, and Kushina gently placed the girl on it, who began to cry again when noticing the absence of her mother, and drew a symbol on her belly. I will use Shiki Fujin to seal half of the QB inside me and the other half in Natsumi. Using the sealing formula of the 8 trigrams. Minato. He's too strong for me. Hurry up. The fox roared and turned, and Gamma. He was thrown out. The 9-tailed fox, with fury in his eyes, looked at the baby and the symbol, and understood that he was going to be sealed again. No. A giant claw lunged at the baby to kill him, but was stopped. Kushina and Minato were standing in his way, with a claw stuck in their guts and blood dripping from their mouths. The baby stopped crying and looked at them curiously, blinking. They smiled at him, even though they couldn't feel their legs anymore. I will also seal our remaining chakra in the seal of the 8 trigrams, so we won't see her for a while, he said. Let's tell her what we want to tell her. Natsumi, don't be picky about food, eat a lot, and grow strong. Take a bath every day, go to bed early and sleep well. Study your ninjutsu a lot. I was never good at it, maybe you are, and if things don't go well, don't get depressed. Friends, no matter how many, just make sure that the few you have you can truly trust. Regarding the 3 prohibitions, be careful when lending or borrowing money, and make sure to save part of your pay for the mission. And do not drink until you are 20, and too much takeout is harmful to your health and for the guys. And don't go around chasing strangers and look for someone just like your father Ma, and watch out for Jiraiya-sensei. He paused and shuddered. Natsumi, difficult and painful times are coming, take good care of yourself. There's so much I want to tell you, to show you, I want to stay with you longer. But I've already made your big brother wait too much. I love you, Minato, I'm sorry I took all your time too. Minato smiled painfully. Natsumi, my words to you as your father are the same as to your chatty mother. The QB was sealed once again. When they arrived at the battlefield, they found only the corpse of the fourth Hokage and his wife with a crying baby on an altar. The only one who knew the boy's lineage was Irizen Sarutobi, the third Hokage. When he realized what had happened, he cursed himself. This day will be remembered by present and future generations as a day to mourn their losses and celebrate the victory of their Hokage. Konoha lost countless civilians and shinobi, among them the man acclaimed and feared worldwide as the Yellow Lightning of Konoha. He died, leaving his legacy to his daughter, Uzumaki Natsumi. However, he left another legacy that neither he nor the third Kage knew about. Chapter 1: The Beginnings. Naruto was a quiet child at the age of 6. His violet eyes reflected the innocence of a child of his age. For the first 4 years of his life, the only thing he knew was a laboratory and a small room. The pale-faced, slanted-eyed man was the only adult he saw. She doesn't remember much about him, as all the contact she had was when he was giving her painful injections. Those just made him feel strange. However, he did not think that his life was terrible. He received food daily and had a roof over his head, so he never complained. However, everything changed when one day, an old man in a red hat and white robe burst into the laboratory, followed by a dozen masked men. The pale-faced man managed to escape. However, only Naruto and another boy, a little older than him, survived the man's macabre experiments. Naruto didn't have a name when he was rescued. The pale man always called him by his badge number. It was 2 years ago when he discovered that people had names instead of numbers. He still remembers him and was taken to a room with white walls and no windows, together with the other boy, whom he perfectly remembered having seen once in the laboratory. A blonde man with a ponytail, probably in his early 20s, was standing in front of them. The man noticed their nervousness and thought maybe some food would help them open up a little. He asked them to wait and came back with 2 bowls of something. Eat up, the man entertained himself. None of the children moved. This is ramen, and it won't hurt you. Of course, considering that you don't eat ramen every day. The man tried to make a joke, but no one laughed. Of course, they don't know how to use chopsticks. He put his hand to his forehead. Here, I help them, he offered, and used the chopsticks to start feeding them. After the first bite, he mentally admitted, of course, that ramen was the most amazing thing he had ever tasted in his life. It didn't matter that he was only used to eating dry and packaged food. It was the first time I had eaten something with a similar taste. The boy looked at him with wide eyes. The man let out a giggle. It's good, huh? It even has my favorite ingredient, Naruto Maki. The man laughed when he saw the child's astonished expression. He kept looking at the bowl. Naruto muttered as he looked at the spiral-patterned object. When they both finished eating, the man addressed them again. Let's see if my name is Yamanaka and Noichi. What are your names? Do you remember anything from before you were there? His tone was kind. He called me number 17, and the man arched an eyebrow at that. Number yes. I was number 4, said the older of the two. Well, that won't do. Tell me, what do you like the most? The man asked in a childish tone, smiling. I didn't want to scare them now that they were finally talking. The children were quiet for a while. Suddenly, the younger of the two, the blonde boy, answered in a shy voice. Ramen. And Noichi laughed out loud at the answer. Ramen, eh? All right. How about if he stopped to think, touching his chin with his index finger? Naruto. Do you like the name Naruto? The man ruffled his hair. Naruto nodded slightly. The other boy, however, remained silent. The man turned to him and asked, What about you? Do you like something? He did not answer. Seeing this, the man sighed. Ah, if that's the case, then how about Tenzo? The boy looked at him confused and muttered, Tenzo. However, the man interpreted his tone as a sign of acceptance and nodded. So, let's go now, Naruto, Tenzo. After that, Naruto and a still confused Tenzo were placed in an orphanage. However, Tenzo mysteriously disappeared one day and was not seen again for some years. That's when he discovered his passion for ramen. He might regret naming himself after an ingredient in ramen when he was older, but right now, the only thing Naruto liked was ramen. The director of the orphanage was a woman in her 50s, whom the children simply called Grandma. She was a kind lady who loved taking care of children. The orphanage had a box where people could donate whatever they wanted. When the box was full enough, the headmistress distributed the things among the children. It usually contained toys, so Naruto never took anything after the first few times. One day like that, the matron came to see him, and Naruto knocked on the door and entered the room. She found him sitting up in bed, practically. His writing. Her room was simple. Brown painted walls, 4 beds, 1 in each corner, and a window. He was almost always alone, whether practicing calligraphy in a notebook or sitting under a tree near the river, listening to the singing of insects and the chirping of birds. Naruto always felt strangely at peace near the river and trees, and he never liked closed rooms after the first 4 years of isolation. The other children used to avoid him because he rarely spoke more than a few words and never showed interest in playing with them. So they nicknamed him the boring boy. She sat opposite him on the bed and looked at him. I want you to have this. He showed something in his hand. I know you don't like toys, so I wanted to give you this. It was a thin object, wrapped in cloth. Curiosity overcame him, and he took it in his hands. As he unwrapped it, he watched it fascinated. It was a brown flute, somewhat old but well preserved, with black details. He looked into her eyes, surprised. I know you never knew when your birthday was, but today, January 17th, is the day you came here. Last year, so in a way, it might be your birthday after all. She smiled at him. This belonged to my mother when I was your age. I loved it when I played it. I never learned to play it, so I kept it with me all this time, but I think it would be better if I got it. You'll see. Happy birthday. Naruto felt something in his chest, something painful and pleasant at the same time, and he grabbed it. Happiness. This is how happiness feels. He thought with moistened eyes, but kept silent. She looked at Grandma, who smiled, knowing how she felt. She patted his head affectionately and got up to leave. He heard a muffled thank you when he was at the door and looked over his shoulder. Naruto was a good boy, and she had tried very hard to make him feel happier. It was the first time in his life that little Naruto smiled, and his smile was of a touching beauty. That day, somehow, the trees and flowers bloomed all over Konoha village like never before. On October 10th, he experienced fear, perhaps for the first time in his admittedly short life. I was at the park, sitting alone on a swing, watching other children play. His grandmother had been encouraging him to make friends, as he didn't have any. But he was not very enthusiastic. The first thing he saw was a huge fire in the distance. People started to panic. They took their children into their arms and went out. They ran out of the park. He followed them too. That's when he saw it for the first time, and a giant fox was writhing in the middle of the village, destroying everything around him. He stood motionless in the middle of the street, feeling so small and insignificant, watching with wide open eyes, as the giant fox was suddenly trapped with golden chains. He roared as debris flew everywhere. He would surely have died if not for a black-haired girl, the same age, who was carrying a baby in her arms, grabbed him by the hand and dragged him with her. He was too shocked to resist. If he had looked around instead of being engrossed in the fox, he would have noticed the countless corpses surrounding him. Come with me. Quickly. The girl screamed. The girl tried to hide her fear. However, Naruto noticed that his hands were shaking. Maybe she was even more scared than he was, but she kept running and protecting the baby. Naruto wondered if there would ever be something so important to him as to protect him with his life. It seemed silly to him, and at the same time, his head hurt, so he stopped to think about it. "Why weren't you moving? Don't you want to live?" she asked him when she arrived at the shelter. However, Naruto didn't react to his question and kept looking at the baby in his arms, his eyes full of curiosity. Realizing which way he was looking, she told him, "This is Sasuke, my little brother." Naruto looked away and said nothing. The hours passed, and, finally, everything fell silent. The black-haired girl had gone out earlier to look for her parents. When they came out, everything around them was in ruins. People were silent, in mourning. Even though I knew that I had nothing to lose, even though I knew that I didn't have anyone important, I still didn't understand why I felt that I had lost something very important that day, and why I kept crying. Sarutobi and Ruzan were having a terrible day. Yesterday, he was at home with his wife, smoking his pipe, and enjoying the nice weather. Everything changed in an instant. His wife had died. His successor, Namikaze Minato, and his wife, Uzumaki Kushina, had sacrificed their lives for the village, leaving their son an orphan. Half of the village was in ruins. He only wished for this nightmare to end, to return home, where his wife would surely be waiting for him, and to contemplate the landscape through the window while smoking his pipe. But this was not a dream, and his wife was really dead. A council meeting was called, and all the clan chiefs were summoned, as they had all survived the attack. His old friends and advisors, Udatane Koru, Mitokado Omura, and Shimura Danzo, were also present. In one corner, there was a crib with a sleeping baby. Konoha has lost its Hokage. 12 hours ago, Kyuubi was somehow extracted from his previous Hinshiriki, Uzumaki Kushina. Minato and Kushina didn't survive, unfortunately, but they saved us all by sealing the beast inside this little girl. Iruzen had a face that betrayed his tiredness. He had dark circles under his eyes, and his face was even more wrinkled. The atmosphere around the table was gloomy, and for a while no one spoke. It was one thing to hear the rumors of the death of the Hokage, and quite another to have them confirmed. "Is this child, and is he the son of the fourth Hokage?" Omura asked. It wasn't a secret, but the only Uzumaki in the village had a relationship with Minato, so it wasn't far-fetched. Iruzen was silent, and everyone drew their own conclusions. Konoha has lost many of its shinobi, and we don't need other nations to usman in our time of weakness. Grant me the guardianship of the Hinshiriki, and I will train this child to be the most powerful shinobi in Konoha. His perfect weapon. It was Danzo who said this, and no one was surprised. However, almost everyone present knew what he meant. However impeccable it might seem to his advisors, the idea had its drawbacks. And Iruzen was not slow to point them out. "I can't allow you to do that," Danzo said in a grave but authoritative voice. "Even if you are right, the true strength of a Hinshiriki lies in his emotions. Your methods may seem promising on the surface, but in the long run, they will be counterproductive." Perhaps he was somewhat influenced by the boy's lineage, but the three of them knew Sarutobi well enough to know that he would not give in. Danzo stared at him with his one eye, but did not speak again. Civilians and all shinobi of lower rank than Hounen will be banned from accessing it. This knowledge. We all know how the Hinshiriki are treated, and people are afraid of what they do not understand. That fear turns into anger and anger into hatred. If this child was hated by the village and grew up hating the village in turn, it would be disastrous. Shikaku, the leader of the Nara clan, nodded his head. However, not everyone present seemed to agree. No one could guess what the leaders of the Uchiha and Kaga clans were thinking, nor could Danzo, because of their impassive faces. If anyone had objections, no one expressed them, and other matters were dealt with. It would be a long time before anything resembling an order was established. When the council meeting was adjourned, Iruzen covered his face with the palms of his hands and took a deep breath, saying goodbye to his Sambu. Apparently, he didn't talk to anyone. Jiraiya, a tall man, with white pointed waist-length hair and red dark circles, suddenly appeared out of nowhere, with his hands crossed. His expression was grim, like a stone. "I will find the wretch," Jiraiya said, gritting her teeth. "I'll find out who did this." He was too late. He was ashamed to admit that, while his student was fighting for his life, he was spying on women in a bathhouse. He arrived as soon as he could, but Minato had already left. Irison took a long time to respond. The fourth time is gone, Konoha needs a new time. One that, Jiraiya did not reply, refusing even before finishing the sentence. A teacher does not succeed his own student, and I am not half as worthy to be Hokage as my natural. And it seems that you will have to take the position again, Sensei said with a sad smile. It seems so, and Ruzan sighed. Well, do you want to see your goddaughter? He asked her, and Jiraiya walked over to the crib in the corner. A bittersweet smile adorned the wise toad's face. He looks a lot like his parents. He thought, and so much that it almost hurt to look at her. I know, Jiraiya, I know, his sensei just looked at him. To the face to realize what I was thinking. You'll take her with you. Kakashi is too young, and you were named his godfather precisely because of that. No, sensei, and shook his head. I'm always on the go. I can't take her with me. If he were with me, his life would be in even more danger than it is already. And Orochimaru is still on the loose. She'd be safer in the village, and I'll protect her anyway. It was impeccable logic, and his sensei did not argue. Well then, I guess it's time for me to resume my research. I'm sure Minato would want her to keep writing her favorite books, and her voice cracked with emotion, as she tried to laugh with her usual composure to regain some normalcy. He went to the window and looked away from his teacher. Irison didn't need to look at her student to know she was crying. Bye, sensei, she exclaimed before jumping out the window. Irison felt strangely lonely in his office. His student, Jiraiya, regarded Minato as a son. Irison couldn't claim to know what he was feeling. Losing a child was not something I wanted to experience. He looked at the sleeping child, and his gaze softened. Minato, Kushina, take care of her. Chapter 2. The Days at the Academy. Naruto-chan, are you sure about this? 4 months have passed since the Kyuubi attack, and after a great effort to control the damage, Konoha managed to recover too. Since a large number of ninjas perished in the attack, children were encouraged to enter the academy at an early age. After some thought, Naruto decided to join the academy. He promised himself that he would never feel weak again. That feeling of hopelessness he felt then was terrifying. I wanted to be strong. Thus, he informed his grandmother of his decision to enter the academy. And, naturally, she was not very convinced. Naruto had become one of her favorite children in recent months. And he always insisted on helping her, whether it was with the shopping, the laundry, or in the kitchen. Yes, I really want to be a ninja. I also want to be strong. He insisted, with determination in his gaze. I really didn't want to see him leave. I knew that as soon as an orphan entered the academy, he received a scholarship to rent an apartment until graduation. Naruto would also live in his own place if he wished. Sometimes Naruto wondered if this is how it felt to have a mother. It made her happy, but sometimes she overdid it. Grandma sighed. It's okay, we'll admit you to the Ninja Academy. He ruffled her hair and smiled sadly. Naruto smiled slightly, showing his teeth, and Grandma let out a giggle. What? Why are you laughing? He bowed his head. She kept laughing. It's nothing, I just like to see you smile, he didn't lie, but he didn't reveal the real reason for his laughter. His missing tooth made him look even more adorable when he smiled. She will miss him. The academy started in the summer. Naruto chose to live in his own small apartment. The scholarship was enough for him to buy food and pay the monthly rent, in addition to saving some money for other things. To enter, they had to pass a fairly simple aptitude test, and Naruto had no problem in that regard. Naruto was wearing a white t-shirt and gray shorts. There were many children present. Most of them were with their parents, but there were also quite a few alone. Naruto felt a little nervous surrounded by so many people. He looked around and realized that the black-haired girl who had saved his life was also there. She was accompanied by a man who she assumed was her father, and her mother, who was carrying her little brother in her arms. She watched as the baby kept whining for his sister to take him in her arms, but the girl only smiled at her brother in apology. And said something. The baby pouted and looked away, straight at him. Realizing where her little brother was looking, the girl's eyes widened as she recognized him and waved at him. Naruto, embarrassed at being caught staring, turned his head to where the Hokage was giving his welcome speech. Congratulations to everyone on their admission to the academy. Hiruzen briefly walked through the audience, pausing his gaze on Naruto's hair for an instant. He blinked and pushed that impossible thought out of his mind, resuming his speech. Naruto was confused. For a second, he swore that the Hokage recognized him, but he didn't remember talking to him. After the speech was finished, the academy classes began and the parents left their children. Naruto took a seat in the left corner. He watched as the class filled up and the black-haired girl sat in the front row. She looked at him once and then, snorting, puffed up her cheeks and turned her back to him. Naruto arched an eyebrow. What had he done to annoy her? Shortly after, a rather stout man, with brown hair and dressed in the standard Konoha uniform, entered the class. Congratulations to everyone. Starting today, we will start our study program. I hope everyone will try their best and become excellent shinobi. My name is Daikoku Funeno, Chunin rank, and I will be your teacher for the foreseeable future. Let's introduce ourselves. For now, just tell me his name. Soon everyone started to introduce themselves, and when it was her turn, the black-haired girl stood up. Uchiha Izumi. As soon as he said this, some children started whispering among themselves. Ucha. I have heard that they are very cocky, she is such a pretty daughter. I bet he's only here because he belongs to an important clan, and Zumi glared at the last one, but ignored the first two. You'll see. Stop it. You're not here to gossip or spread rumors. Next. He barked funny. A girl with tattoos on her face stood up confidently. I'm Inuzuka Anna. Soon his turn came, and as he got up, he saw Izumi looking at him out of the corner of his eye. I'm Naruto. I hope we get along well. He made a small bow, just as he had been taught. Some of the children laughed. Wait, is it called fish pie? What kind of parents name their child fish pie? Even his sensei couldn't hide his smile. He sat down embarrassed and turned around, muttering bitterly. Who said my parents were there to name me? His voice was drowned out by the laughter, but he noticed that Izumi was looking at him with an astonished expression. After the presentations, they talked about the essentials of being a shinobi. Rank, jutsu, etc. Soon it was noon, and they were taken to lunch. He saw that everyone was forming groups and sighed. Grandma would scold me to make friends, and she found a tree and sat under it, apart from others. As soon as he opened his lunchbox, he saw someone's feet. As he continued to stare, he saw that it was the black-haired girl named Izumi. She looked at him carefully. I was shocked, and I was sure you were mute. You never said anything when we met, she said mischievously, narrowing her eyes. You know, it's pretty rude to ignore someone who's waving at you. I was startled. He ignored the last statement and did not look her in the eye. Aha. His tone was heavy with sarcasm. Thank you for that day, I would have died if it wasn't for you. He scratched his cheek and looked away. It's okay. If you are truly grateful, we can say that you owe me a favor. She smiled. Naruto smiled uncomfortably. Well, I'll see you later. It was a pleasure to meet you, Fiskak. She ran out laughing when she saw him almost pouting. What a weird girl. And when lunch was over, they were taken to a clearing. We will have friendly matches to determine the basic classification of the class. Let's see, and first, Naruto and Izumi. Stand in the center and make the gesture of union before starting. They will stop when I tell them to or if their back touches the ground. Both children imitated the gesture he showed them and took their respective positions. Naruto took a deep breath and turned to Izumi, looking into her eyes. He took an impromptu stance. Izumi remained standing with one hand on her abdomen, still making the seal. Their hands met at the sign of the union, and the warmth disappeared from their eyes, something that disturbed him. Let's get started. The instructor barked, and Naruto ran towards Izumi as fast as he could. It all happened in an instant. An instant before he was standing in front of her. The next, he was looking at the blue sky, with Izumi over him. His two fingers, the same ones he had used to make the stamp, pointed between his eyes. He stared at her, his eyes wide. Everyone was silent. The children who had teased her earlier were speechless. She suddenly smiled and turned away from him, and he offered her his right hand, still forming the seal. Naruto couldn't believe it. He would have never imagined that that girl Slim, who was probably a year younger than him, was so strong. He forgot to breathe and suddenly coughed. "I'm weak." Apostrophe took her hand shakily and stood up, shaking the dust off his pants. He did not look into her eyes. "Uchiha and Zumigana." The instructor managed to control his voice. The others were still speechless. It was to be expected. His skills would put even some geniuses to shame. Well, it was to be expected from Princess Uchiha. Without a doubt, Uchiha and Zumi had to be closely watched, and soon all the fighting was over and it became clear that the children belonging to a ninja clan had an advantage over their civilian companions. At the end of the last test, one of which consisted of throwing kunai, in which he barely managed to hit the target, and even so, the shot was quite deflected. The class rankings were posted on the blackboard for everyone to see. Uchiha Izumi won the first place by a wide margin. Naruto was among the last 10% of the students. Soon it got dark and the class ended. Everyone was leaving the classroom chatting with their new friends. Naruto got up from his seat and walked out with his head down, not looking at anything, and with his gaze lowered. When he was outside the academy grounds, he took off running without looking back. Izumi saw him and frowned. I was too hard on him. Maybe she should have been a little more understanding, and shook her head. He ran, and ran, and ran until the buildings merged with the trees, and the smell of damp would replace the smell of street food. He reached his usual clearing, the tree near the river bank. The sun hadn't set yet, but it was almost there. He fell on his back, leaning on the tree with his hands behind his head. The branches seemed to move towards him. It was almost as if they were trying to comfort him. He took a deep breath and knew he wouldn't be the best, but I never thought the difference would be so big, and to be honest, it was quite humiliating. He had to get stronger, but how? Apparently, I would need some basic guidance. And if I wanted to surpass the guys at the academy, I'd have to do something else and maybe try my luck at the library. It was rare for any of the students to show an interest in books, so no one should bother him. Yes. He nodded to himself. That sounds good. I would start from the beginning. Naruto sighed and relaxed, watching the sunset now that his problem was solved. He decided it wouldn't be so bad to stay for a while and took his flute out of his backpack. There was no one waiting for him at home. After all, he now had his own apartment, and Uchiha Izumi was born on July 9th, the daughter of Uchiha Fugaku, the leader of the Uchiha clan, and his wife Uchiha Mikoto. When he was born, his father tried to show himself disappointed and distant because he wanted a boy, an heir, who would be the pride of the clan. But looking into her eyes, eyes that reflected such innocence, even Fugaku, known for his arrogance, felt like a child. It was rumored in the clan that Fugaku cried like a little girl when Izumi uttered her first word. Dad. Fugaku managed to control his paternal instincts as Izumi grew up. Company, but his love for his daughter was still undeniable. Mikoto was not far behind. He always dressed her in different clothes and pampered her enthusiastically. Her best friend, Uzumaki Kushina, also adored her, to the point of loving her as if she were his own daughter. This greatly influenced her recovery after the death of her first child, which completely shattered her, and Mikoto knew this. So she called Kushina often or visited her. However, the Uchiha clan as a whole was divided. The older generation believed that she was only good for marrying another Uchiha, a strong man of her preference. This was because, in the Uchiha clan, although girls receive a good education, they are expected to become housewives upon marriage. On the other hand, the younger generation had a more open view. There was also a rumor that when an old councilman brought up this idea, Fugaku flatly refused to marry off his precious daughter and give her to any guy, even going so far as to threaten the old man with physical harm if he ever. He was carrying out his clearly far-fetched plan, according to his own account. But the rumors are just rumors and truth. When Izumi was 3 years old, her father started her training after some cordial conversations with his wife. No way, her daughter, Uchiha Fugaku's daughter, was going to be a weak child. And he was pleasantly surprised. His daughter was a genius. He quickly learned things that no 3-year-old should do. Fugaku's chest would have burst with pride. When Izumi was 4 years old, her younger brother, Sasuke, was born. Fugaku was so happy that he almost smiled in front of the doctor. Almost. Now he had a son, and his clearly superior genes would allow Sasuke to be as talented as his older sister. And I could finally shut up the old curmudgeons of the clan. When Izumi saw her younger brother for the first time, she became instantly attached and promised herself to protect him always. Sasuke seemed to reciprocate her feelings, which was only fair. Great. When she was 5 years old, her father enrolled her in the ninja academy. I was so excited for the first day. I wanted to make a lot of friends and participate in amazing missions as soon as possible. Izumi was standing next to her parents and brother as the Hokage gave the welcome speech. Her brother insisted that she pay attention to him, almost falling off her mother's hip. She smiled apologetically. Maybe next time, Sasuke. His brother made a pout and looked away. She followed his gaze and found the same strange and mute child whom she had saved that day. She waved at him, and he looked away sharply. Humph. How rude. That day, during training, he gave him a good beating, but then he felt a little bad to see him leave so head down. There was nothing to be done, she would have to apologize the next time she saw him. When she got home, her father was the first to greet her. He seemed quieter than usual, but she didn't give him any importance. Izumi. He stopped dead in his tracks. Father, come with me. I'd like to show you something. They went out together, and Fugaku took her by the hand, guiding her. They passed by the Ucha market, where people were greeting them. Izumi looked at her father's face and thought about where he would take her. Soon they came to a large clearing, filled with countless small tombstones and a large red tombstone. They are all the ones who perished in the previous war, and we won, but not without consequences. Countless dead were buried here, and some were not found their bodies, and others could only be partially buried for their families. Some were as young as 9. They were genin fresh out of the academy, Fugaku said with a gloomy countenance. He did not look at her, and kept his eyes fixed on the front. Father, and why are you showing me all this? Izumi asked in a shaky voice. She was not used to death, despite having witnessed it so closely during the attack of the Kyumi. She was acting for her brother's safety, driven solely by adrenaline. Fugaku's gaze softened, but he didn't look at her. A shinobi's life is never safe. We are in constant danger, even at home. We may feel safe, but it's just an illusion. A shinobi should always be alert. A good shinobi always learns to distrust people. Those are the rules I follow, and it would be wise if you did too. He put his hand on her head. Today, you started your path as a shinobi by entering the academy. From now on, don't expect me to treat you like a child. His voice suddenly became harsh, and he held her by the shoulder with some force. This is the harsh reality of our world. Izumi didn't show it if she felt uncomfortable. She kept looking at the names on the tombstone. I thought the shinobi should protect, however, so many died. And many of them were so young. Why? Father, and why do we kill? What drives one person to kill another? How can we kill someone knowing that his family was waiting for him, and that he will never see him again? Why is that? Fugaku hugged her tightly by the shoulder, and allowed himself to feel pride. Her daughter was taking it in much better than she expected. She had to hate him, or she had to cry. But he proved to have a maturity unbecoming of his age when the situation required it. That's something I can't tell you. You'll have to figure out the answer for yourself someday. He said no word as they returned to the district in silence. I kept thinking about all that. Father, do you hear that sound? He asked suddenly. Huh? What sound? Fugaku looked around. It's probably some animal. We are still deep in the forest. I'll be back later. Suddenly he darted in the direction from whence he had heard it. Fugaku arched an eyebrow, but shook his head and started walking back home. He had nothing to worry about. Her daughter rarely got lost, if ever. He followed the sound, which seemed like a sweet melody. He found it charming as he walked towards it. He noticed that the trees were moving, getting into, almost dancing to the tune. He saw a fawn sleeping with what was probably his mother. When he looked at the branches, he found many birds perched on them. The flowers seemed to him more alive than ever. He was phenomenal. She followed the sound to a clearing, and what she found stunned her, and the sun had set, and Naruto stopped playing the flute. It was getting late, and he assumed that he should already return to his apartment. Probably. "You're really good." He was suddenly startled. A ghost. He was ashamed to admit it, but he was terrified of ghosts. How do you fight against something that you can't see or touch? He fell on his back and looked frantically. Left and right. The voice sounded like that of a child, and for some reason it was familiar. "Hey, I'm up here." He looked at the tree he was sitting under and saw the girl who had hit him that day. She was smiling, sitting on a branch, swinging her legs. "How long have you been watching me?" he asked suspiciously. "It was suspicious, and long enough to listen to your beautiful song. You're really good." She smiled at him and winked at him. Naruto's cheeks turned slightly red from embarrassment. He looked away to hide his face. "It's rude to spy on people." "Who said he was spying?" "I just heard a noise and came to investigate. But I didn't want to bother you, so I kept quiet." "That's what the stalker says," Naruto muttered. He stood up abruptly, turning his back on her. "You beat me quite easily today, you are very strong." "So, Axis, sorry for today. I didn't mean to be so harsh, please be my friend. And help me to become stronger." He made a bow. "Huh." Izumi was confused. I was sure he would say something accusatory and mean, but friends. "Well, it's just," he left the sentence unfinished, scratching his cheek. "Why is it so difficult? Is it because it's the first time I've made a friend?" "Well," he looked up. Sharply, blinking. "All right. But, no buts. I know. Let's make a deal. Since friends help each other, I will help you get stronger, and, in return, you will only have to buy me a little something every Sunday." Naruto made a face would be. "Great. I'll see you tomorrow," he said, and without waiting for an answer, he stood on tiptoe. If anyone had seen his face, they would have seen an expression of relief. He was in a bad mood after his walk with his father. That's part of the reason he ran away so fast. But he was feeling much better now. Naruto stood for a while, his hair blowing in the wind. He felt strangely excited and a little happy. His first friend. A smile was drawn on his face as he started to run back to his house with a light step. It was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Naruto dodged a punch and jumped back, moving away from his opponent. He heard more that he saw wooden shurikens flying towards him and deflected them with a stick. Since I was still a student, I couldn't buy real guns and had to improvise. But it didn't matter, as long as he kept improving. He could not see his opponent anywhere and became tense, looking out of the corner of his eye. He was alert, knowing that his opponent was superior to him. They didn't give him time, and he was forced to dodge a lunge. He made a feint, but his opponent anticipated it, and Naruto grabbed his stomach as he felt a punch in the abdomen. He ended up on his back, gasping and shrinking in on himself. "Ah," he coughed and breathed hard. "You hit very hard, senpai." It was winter in Tierra del Fuego, and it had been snowing heavily around Konoha for the last week. A thick blanket of snow covered the clearing and the trees. He was wearing a white jacket, with black stripes running from the shoulders to the arms, an orange undershirt and black pants. He hadn't gotten up yet, he was breathing hard, his warm breath was visible in the cold. Naruto looked mockingly at the person standing over him with his hands on his hips. "Wow, you're both getting incredibly strong for your age. I may have to try even harder to stay ahead." Naruto got up and started to fuck towards the river. "I don't see myself surpassing you," Shisui-senpai, and you're only 4 years older than me, but you're already a jounin, he said, taking gulps of water from the river. I'm not even a genin yet, and since that day, 2 years ago, Naruto started training daily with Izumi. The next day, when he went to the library, he borrowed several books on the history and basics of shinobi. He was very inspired by Senju Tobirama and Uchiha Madara. Tobirama for his ingenious intellect and Madara for his destructive power in combat. Many of the modern jutsu were based on Tobira Moderna's inventions. For Madara, his name was enough to inspire terror in a grown man, even after so many years. Another shinobi I deeply respected was Namikaze Minato. Although he was only Hokage for a year, he was one of the strongest shinobi of his time. To this day, he is the only one who holds the order to flee when he sees someone. However, it was precisely because he had killed the Kyuubi, a being whom Naruto deeply feared, that he respected him more than the other two. When they started training together, he was little more than a punching bag for Izumi. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, he was catching up. He started running in the mornings and afternoons, strengthening his knuckles and legs by hitting and kicking poles. He even learned how to invoke his chakra after a few months of training. One day, while they were practicing fencing in a clearing in the forest, Yukiya Shisui saw them and invited them to a match. He was older than them, but not by much. Shisui was a very humble and simple person. She had short, dark, tousled hair and well-defined eyelashes. They couldn't even touch him. But something about them impressed Shisui, and he offered to take them under his tutelage. Since then, they started practicing combat and survival exercises with him whenever they could. Over time, he became a kind of big brother to Izumi and Naruto. Sometimes, when they were training, Izumi would take her brother Sasuke with her because, apparently, that boy loved his sister more than his parents. Sasuke was an adorable boy, but to his surprise, he had an almost antagonistic relationship with Naruto. What did he do? Shisui mainly helped them to perfect their speed and technique. Since Shisui said that ninjutsu was banned for now, they couldn't do much in that regard. Of course, that doesn't mean I didn't teach them anything about ninjutsu. At the age of 7 and 8, Izumi and Naruto had already mastered the 3 fundamentals of the academy and the shadow clones. Being a Uchiha, Izumi could already do the great fireball jutsu. Naruto convinced her to teach him, but he wasn't nearly as good. The shadow clone was very useful to them because, since they were already ahead of the academy level, they didn't have to attend class every day. It was enough to send their clones. Everyone was amazed when Naruto managed to create his shadow clone on the first try, although it took a little while for Izumi. Shisui told him that he should investigate the multiple shadow clone jutsu, which requires considerably more chakra. Because it turns out I had chakra to spare, it shouldn't take long. I got promoted on the pitch, so it was different for me. But I think at least you'll be chunin when you're my age. Shisui smiled at him, and also threw a stone into the water. Then he threw another stone, and this one hit the previous one. Naruto made a face would be. Stop showing off. I can do it too, you know. Ha. Of course, show me. Ha. I mean, yeah. Just look at me. He threw a stone, and aimed to throw another one behind, sticking out his tongue in signal of concentration. As she threw it, both boys followed her with their eyes, leaning towards the river, one with fun and the other with expectation. Suddenly, a loud splash was heard. Both fell into the river at the same time as the stones came together. When he reappeared, he saw Izumi laughing loudly on the floor, holding her stomach. Sasuke was clapping in the background, wearing an oversized jacket, and laughing nervously. Naruto spat out water and climbed out of the river, hugging himself as his teeth wore down. Hey, what are you laughing at? He swore he saw Sasuke smiling at him with a sneer. You two were taking too long, so I came to get you. Sasuke was kind enough to accompany me. Right, Sasuke-chan. Sasuke laughed again and clapped his hands. Your brother is not a good person, Sasuke-chan is an angel. Angel, oh yes, totally, that's sarcasm. Since when do you use sarcasm? Since the day your brother named me his mortal enemy. That never happened. It doesn't matter what you wanted to talk about. And wait, where did Shisui-senpai go? He said he was going to show me something cool today. Well, he used a substitution jutsu and disappeared when I pushed him into the river. She gave him an embarrassed smile. It was foolish to think that I would surprise him. Anyway, as the teachers at the academy already know that we can use Sun's clone. All because of you, they've been talking about an early promotion. I already told my father about it, and he was intrigued to know that there is another student who graduates early. And even more so because I have a friend. Now he wants to meet you, he finished with a slightly forced smile. Naruto looked at her in surprise. They could see Sasuke pretending to play in the snow, but his eyes were fixed on Naruto. It wasn't my fault that my clone got into a fight and dissipated when things got out of control. Some people have completely different personalities than me. The truth is that it was frustrating. Anyway, then let's go see your father. Izumi hesitated. Just a warning, he can be a bit eccentric when it comes to me. Naruto arched an eyebrow and shook his wet hair, splashing Sasuke's icy face as he stood next to his sister, causing Sasuke to squint. It was intentional, and they both knew it. It was well known that one of them was always trying to outdo the other. Naruto gave him an unusual malicious smile, much to Lucia's childish anger. How bad could it be? Come on. I was hoping I hadn't jinxed it. Chapter 3. The awakening Uchiha Fugaku had short brown hair that reached to his shoulders and onyx-colored eyes with visible wrinkles underneath. A trait that Izumi inherited to a lesser extent. He was wearing a simple green kimono with gray trousers with the Uchiha symbol on the back. His permanent frown and stern gaze gave him an imposing presence. Well, and Naruto was already nervous. 3 minutes had passed and no one had said a word. The three of them were sitting in Fugaku's study. There was a low table nearby with 2 cups of tea, probably prepared by Izumi's mother. Naruto kept looking into the older man's eyes and didn't look away. Fugaku's frown deepened. He was stunned to learn from his wife that his daughter had made a friend. Normally, it wouldn't be a big deal. His daughter was very cheerful and would probably attract too many friends in a normal situation. But it was not a normal situation. Since that night, 4 years ago, the village's top brass has been gradually driving the Uchiha clan away from the center. There was a rumor among ordinary ninjas that the Uchiha clan was behind the attack of the Kyumi. Both civilians and ninjas were able to see the Sharingan spinning in the beast's eyes on the night of the attack. During the attack, the authorities ordered the Uchiha police to escort the civilians to the shelters, which was suspicious since they were much more suitable to be on the front line. And this did not benefit them at all when the crucial question was posed to them. Where was your clan that night? It didn't matter if the order was given by the high commands or Fugaku. What mattered were the consequences of that decision. A seed of distrust was sown among the population. The shinobi, who were good companions of an Uchiha, began to view their comrades with suspicion. The other clans practically distanced themselves from the Uchiha clan. And someone has been spreading these rumors lately. Fugaku would bet anything that it's those 3 old counselors. Since the founding of Konoha, the Senju clan has always held the authority. While Esirama and Madara played a pivotal role in the construction of the village, it was Senju Esirama who was elected Hokage first. The second Hokage, Senju Tobirama, deeply distrusted the Uchiha clan. Tobirama created the Konoha police to be run by the Uchiha, which was publicly interpreted as a show of trust. But the clan felt marginalized. Naturally, his ideals would be held high by his students. The only exception he contemplated was Irizen, who was practically holding his own. Neutral. But even the Hokage has to take into account the opinions of his advisors. Shimura Danzo, one of the advisors of the Hokage and a very influential person, was the one who adopted Tobirama's ideologies too vehemently, even more than Tobirama himself. It was one of the artificial ones. Of the Uchiha clan's subtle loss of power, despite knowing that this clan was probably the most powerful in the entire village. And a valuable asset. So why would I want to lose the support of the Uchiha? The answer that causes Fugaku both pride and a slight fear is that Danzo is afraid of the Uchiha clan. He fears that he will acquire too much prestige, power and reputation. Danzo likes to have the power in his hands, at his entire disposal. However, he fears that once the Uchiha attain too much power, it will be difficult to control them. That's why he subtly spread rumors against them and kept an eye on them, constantly using his private base Ambu. After all, he had seen those blank masks. He does not know how long the clan's patience will last, but if the situation continues to worsen, he fears that they may be facing a coup d'état. However, such things do not matter to her as much as her daughter Izumi. Of course, if I were the Fugaku of 10 years ago, I'd probably have a very different opinion. He knows that his daughter is a genius, so he was not at all surprised when the teachers of the academy informed him of her early graduation. However, another student, who claims not to belong to any clan or have previous training, achieves the same. Well, and that guy is either a genius or a trained spy. And he can't be sure it's true when he knows how Danzo recruits his root agents. Some people, like his wife Mikoto, of course too innocent, might say that he was being paranoid. Well, and it was. At least say something. It's been 10 minutes since we sat down, and no one has said a word. Silence, Izumi, Fugaku said, without taking his eyes off Naruto, who was sweating profusely. I need to talk to your friend. Alone. Izumi looked at Naruto with concern, but calmed down when he felt her, and stood up. Fine. I'll leave them alone, he growled as he closed the sliding door. Fugaku kept looking into his eyes, but stubbornly returned the older man's gaze with his own. Said Fugaku finally. I can read a person just by looking into his eyes, but I will not comment on it. He narrowed his eyes. What do you want from my daughter? After watching Naruto squirm under his gaze at that moment, he could deduce that this boy was no spy. Or at least a very good one. But he doesn't want to doubt his intuition and admit that the guy next to him acts better than he does. When it comes to seeing beyond illusions, Naruto's eyes opened slightly, but he pinched his thigh and calmed down. She is my best friend, she said sincerely. He saved my life once, and I still haven't been able to thank him enough. I would walk with her to the end of the world if she asked me to. He panicked when he heard the last part. Because, although what he had said might be true, he did not mean to say it out loud. He looked at Fugaku and saw him watching him with a mocking smile. It's impossible to lie to me because of these eyes. His eyes were red, with 3 tamo, and Naruto couldn't look away. Now my next questions. Fugaku's smile widened, almost with malice. Naruto swallowed hard. Mikoto was peeling an apple, while humming a tune sitting in her kitchen chair. She was a fair-complexioned woman, with long, straight, black hair, with bangs falling on both sides of her face, framing her cheeks and her black eyes. She was wearing a simple dark purple blouse, a plum red skirt, and a light yellow apron on top. She watched as the boy she had told her husband about, Naruto, if she remembered correctly, ran and hurried out the front door, with his sandals on the wrong feet. Mikoto directed a disapproving look at her husband, who left the room with an amused, almost satisfied smile on his face. Was it really necessary? He asked with a frown. He was such a polite boy. He even brought homemade cookies as a gift. He pointed to the packed box on the kitchen table. Yes. His smile turned into a slight grimace. Yes, it was. At times like this, no one can be trusted, not even a child. And he is not naive. Despite being only 9 years old, I knew I was testing him all this time. He added thoughtfully, if my daughter considers him a friend, then I am ready to trust him. But that doesn't mean I can't put it to the test to be completely sure. Are you sure now? Because you'll have to apologize to him the next time he comes. And he will? Because I'm going to invite him to Sasuke's birthday. My daughter finally has a friend. And besides, he's a handsome boy. She put her hands to her cheek, forgetting about the apple for a moment. I wonder if they will get married when they are older. Fugaku's jaw tensed at that, and his wife noticed. He passed your little test, didn't he? That means you approve of it too. A mischievous smile appeared on his lips. A sigh of resignation escaped Fugaku's lips as he heard his wife. So we have 2 students who are being considered for early graduation. It's incredibly rare outside of wartime, but it wouldn't be wise to keep them, an elderly toned voice said. They could use some real-life experience. Yes, Okage-sama. Uchiha Izumi and Naruto, said the academy instructor, Funeno, kneeling down. Both have mastered the 3 basic jutsu and can already create shadow clones. While Izumi has always been among the best in the class, Naruto used to be among the worst during the first few months. But he gradually caught up with her and now occupies the 2nd place. I would recommend placing them on the same team with a student from the next graduating class. They have shown a healthy rivalry, which should help them both continue to grow. The Okage was silent for a while he reflected. He was reluctant to allow the children to graduate before the appropriate age. But they couldn't afford to be picky now that they were just recovering from the attack of the Kyumi. Let it be so, I will allow it. He waved his left hand in resignation. You can go now. Yes, Okage-sama, and Ruzan looked out the window, with his arms behind his back. It was night, and I saw how the merchants were closing their shops, and the streets were emptying every minute. I enjoyed moments like this. Just looking at the people he had led for so long, seeing them prosper in this way, gave him a gratifying feeling. His thoughts focused on the 2 children, more on Naruto than on Izumi. They found the boy in his student's abandoned laboratory. Although he deeply detested the inhuman experiments of his student, he felt a certain interest in the result. Of the 60 children they found, only 2 were alive. Their ad didn't match anyone's, so they were taken to an orphanage. I knew that Danzo had taken the other child. Although their ideologies were different, he could not deny that Danzo loved the village as much as he did. It was simply his way of acting, which sometimes irritated Irizan. But I couldn't do anything, because I knew that dancing was a necessary evil. The leaves of trees that bathe in sunlight can only thrive if the roots that grow in the dark are strong. A balance, so to speak. Yin and yang. Light and dark. One cannot exist without the other. He rubbed his forehead and thought about other things, and like the current situation with the Uchiha. How are you going to solve this mess? Hey, Kakashi. A stridently loud voice shouted. Attack. Kakashi was a man of few words. Her spiky silver hair, one indifferent black eye and a lopsided forehead protector covering her other eye gave her a unique appearance. He did not look up from his book and continued walking, dressed in armor that vaguely resembled that of the Zambu, ignoring the voice. The other person followed him. Come on, Kakashi. Don't you want to see him? The voice was heard even louder. Don't you want to pit your flame of youth against mine? See who prevails in this passionate duel between 2 hot-blooded men. What kind of man are you? The man spoke in a louder voice, making a ridiculous gesture with his hands. Gay. How long have you been here? He asked coldly. Gay, already identified, lowered his head in defeat, and dark clouds comically appeared over him. Mato Gay was a man with a questionable taste for fashion and a youthful passion. He was tall and muscular. With a fair complexion, a strong jaw, and a somewhat large nose, Guy stood out for his bushy eyebrows, his bright bowl haircut, and his characteristic green hand with orange leg warmers. He turned away from his friend and said, Damn, your Moderna, carefree attitude doesn't work on me anymore. If I fail to convince you to compete in a youth passion duel, I will do 300 laps of the training ground, using only my right hand. And if I can't do that, okay. She finally looked up from her book and directed her narrowed, disinterested gaze at Guy, putting the book away in her fanny pack. All right. But just one more game. Our score is still tied at 70 to -72. Gay let out a victorious sound and ran her left arm around Kakashi's shoulder, dragging him with her. Naruto watched as the 2 teenagers left and shook his head. After his hasty escape from the Uchiha house, he ended up sitting on a park bench. The top of his face was in the shade of the tree as he tilted his head back. It was a horrible experience with Izumi's father. He asked her questions that were too intimate for her taste. And what made the situation worse was that they were practically holding him captive and asking him questions that he couldn't lie to. And that I am sharing in. It wasn't something I didn't know about. I knew Shisui had his, even though he had never used it against them. He had always heard Izumi talking about getting his, but he had never given it much thought until now. But if a simple glance could achieve this, and I may have to look for a counteroffensive. But which one? His stomach made a noise. He got up from the bench, tussling his hands irritably. The problems will have to wait for a while. He was hungry, and a ramen seemed perfect to him at that moment. A few months later, they both graduated from the academy. According to tradition, they were assigned to teams of 3. Luckily, they were both on the same team. However, her third member, and I can't believe she's stuck with unbearable brats. How old are you guys? 5. Aruk. And Tenma Juice. During his last year at the academy, Tenma earned a reputation as a bully. When he met Izumi, he confronted her about her clan's alleged involvement in Kyugi's attack, seeking revenge for his uncle's death. Izumi denied having any knowledge of the attack and therefore refused to apologize. Tenma attacked her, but she managed to dodge him by tricking him with a clone. Tenma was furious about being assigned to that team, prompting his new squad leader to accuse him of being jealous. But he quietly gritted his teeth during the missions to fulfill his duty and saved his opinion for. When I wasn't on duty. When a previous mission went wrong and Tenma was about to lose his life, Izumi saved him. He reluctantly acknowledged her superiority and promised to reward her. But that didn't mean I had to feel affection for her. It's been a year since they were assigned to Team 2 under the leadership of Jounin Minazuki Yuki. Yuki had short dark hair, unkempt eyebrows, and a goatee. His mouth was small. He appeared to be a competent teacher, but he was jealous when it came to the aspiring genin who surpassed him in skill. I'm 9 years old. And you should be grateful to us. Naruto and I are the ones doing the heavy lifting on this team. The team had a strange dynamic. Tenma hated them both and was constantly reminded of it. Izumi would respond to him insistently, while Naruto would intervene to stop their fights. Although the older boy irritated him, he was still his partner. And Naruto was embarrassed to admit that he didn't have many friends besides Izumi and Shisui. So he couldn't afford to be too rude to potential friends. Although they were not the most compatible, it was undeniable that the 3 were very close friends. A year together in the same team brought people together, or at least generated a sense of familiarity. But Tenma would flatly refuse if someone asked her about it. They had already completed more than 90 D rank and 11 C rank missions. Team 2 was gaining popularity as a strong rookie team, mainly thanks to Izumi and Naruto. At that time, they were on a mission to protect the daimyo himself from fire during his journey to Konoha. His main concern was that the daimyo would arrive on time, as the roads were expected to be free of danger. Quiet, you two. Show respect in the presence of the daimyo-sama. They were rebuked by their leader. He made a bow. I apologize for my shinobi, daimyo-sama. Them, it's okay, he said, chuckling. They remind me of my kids when they were little. Naruto wasn't looking at them, he was exploring the area. This was a vital mission, and it was crucial that everything went perfectly. His participation in the Chunin exam depended on it. An unpleasant smell came to his nose, arousing his curiosity and putting him on guard. It was a smell he had already gotten used to, but that didn't mean he liked it at all. The smell of blood. What is that? The area was suddenly covered by a thick fog that prevented them from seeing the road, and everyone was put on alert. Their leader stopped them with a subtle gesture. Don't move until I tell you to. The 3 Janina felt, although Yuki could not see them. Squadron leader Hounen walked slowly into the fog, carefully. His step was silent and cautious, scanning around for any sign of danger. As he walked deeper into the fog, he felt that his senses, already experienced, were screaming at him to get away from that place. To go as far away as possible. But his pride won't let him. And he never abandoned a mission, fleeing because he considered it dangerous. Why does it have to start now? Soon, the image of a person appeared before his eyes, instantly tensing his body. There was something about this man that made him deeply afraid. Maybe it was the yellow mask with black drawings that looked like flames. Or maybe the spiky black hair that reached to her waist. Or, possibly, the rotating blood red eye visible in the single hole of the mask. An Uchiha, then. Possibly a renegade. A really dangerous situation. Are you responsible for this fog? He asked with false indifference. The man did not say a word, he simply leaned against a tree trunk with his hands crossed and his head slightly tilted. Yuki moved a little, settling in with the surroundings, just in case a fight broke out. I had a horrible feeling about it. This is the entourage of the fired daimyo, he said while brandishing a cradle and in his left hand. Get out of the way, or I'll have to use force. Mum, the protagonist finally murmured in an eerily grave voice. He pretended to think as he rubbed his finger against the dough, where his chin was supposed to be. I don't think he will. The clearing turned into a chaos of blood and viscera as soon as he uttered those words. Yuki didn't have time to blink or scream before she felt a painful tug on her neck and saw the world spinning around her. When he stopped, he was horrified to see his own headless body. The smell of blood was almost unbearable, to the point that even an ordinary civilian could recognize it. The three genin ninjas tensed up and adopted defensive postures. The daimyo closed the curtains of his royal bunk, leaving the guards who were transporting her outside terrified. An ominous silence reigned in the clearing for a whole minute, and they feared what might have happened. The fog cleared, and what they saw made their legs go limp. Yuki's body lay in her own blood. His severed head was close to the man's legs, with a ghastly expression of a silent scream etched on his face. Tenma threw up right there. The guards were shaking. Their faces reflected that they almost considered dropping the vehicle and fleeing for their lives. Izumi and Naruto quickly moved to the front in a defensive position. This was becoming the worst possible situation. The most vital member of his team had fallen without putting up a resistance. Naruto felt his heart racing, cursing himself as the fear of weakness resurfaced once more. Who could guarantee that this man would not kill them right there and then? He was certainly capable of doing so, considering that he had no problem with his leader. I'm sorry. You see, we had a little disagreement. His tone was completely unrepentant. He wanted to live. But I wanted him to die. The masked man shrugged his shoulders, almost indifferently. This was not a fight they could win, and they knew it. Naruto looked out of the corner of his eye, looking for an escape route, anything. Izumi's hand was shaking as she pointed a cradle and at the man and shouted, "What do you want from us? It doesn't matter what he wants. If we don't do anything, we're going to die." Naruto shouted between screams and whispers. The man looked Izumi in the eyes and clicked his teeth in disappointment. One more push and that's it, he confirmed. Tenma walked in front of them with shaky legs at first, but gradually regained strength and stood firm. He took out a cradle and from his bag, adopted a combat posture with his legs apart and held the cradle and with both hands. He looked over his shoulder, directly into Izumi's eyes, with a resigned expression, before looking at Naruto and feeling. I'm going to try to buy some time. I'll run away as soon as I throw myself at him. He swallowed saliva before calming down. At least I won't die in debt to a small child. He pounced on the man with incredible speed. For a genin. The two watched in horror as a bloody sword emerged from his back, bathing the surrounding area in blood. The masked man brandished the blade, and Tenma was thrown aside. Naruto heard a heart-rending scream, full of anguish, and covered his ears. He was horrified to realize that it came from Izumi. Her hair covered her face as she bent over and cried, still screaming, covering her ears with her hands. It hurt to see her like this. The masked man let out a sinister laugh, and something snapped inside Naruto. This man had killed half of his team in cold blood, and Tenma was his friend. And even Yuki-sensei's presence was comforting to him. And now there were only the two of them left. Excellent! Exclaimed the man, clapping his hands mockingly. That should make killing you even more pleasurable. You fucking bastard. Naruto looked at the man with pure fury in his eyes. I will kill you. She felt something bubbling up inside her, but she didn't care that it was. He caught that feeling and pulled on it. As he instinctively clasped his hands together, an incredible amount of dense chakra accumulated inside him. Holding the position, he looked at the man. And then he roared. From the place where the man was, trees sprang up that split the earth and tied him up. The trees were still growing, with thick branches sprouting from them. The earth was shaking. He gave himself completely to it. Finally, his legs gave out, and he fell to his knees, breathing with difficulty. The clearing was full of trees. Luckily, they were in a forest near the village, so it wouldn't be out of tune. Too much. This new event left him stunned. Of course I knew what it was about. One would have to be a fool to ignore the legendary would release technique. It was said that the first Kage owned it, but he had not passed it on to his children. But since he used it, did it mean that he was related to the Senju? He had a lot of questions in his mind, but he pushed them away with a stroke of his pen when he realized something scary. He watched in horror as the masked man emerged from the miniature forest, completely unharmed. He began to chuckle. And so it was true after all. I admit that I had my doubts about you when Zetsu brought me this information. After all, it is not every day that you find a user of the Malera style. Looks like all you two needed was a little push. Having finished his work, the man turned around and began to walk away. He had gone out to look for potential members for his organization. And Zetsu had brought some interesting information. Princess Uchiha, considered the most skilled Uchiha of her generation, with incredible potential. And a user of the wood style with a natural affinity. He knew that this was one of the boys that Orochimaru had used for his genetic mutation project. It would be foolish to assume that the boy's powers were due solely to genetic mutations. With the talent he showed for someone using the wood release technique for the first time, no, he had to be a born user. It seemed that I would have to visit the snake. Maybe I could recruit Orochimaru as well. His body suddenly began to be absorbed into a spiral-shaped distortion. We'll see each other again. I hope you will be stronger next time, he said before disappearing, for your own good. Naruto's face hit the ground as he was breathing hard. He didn't show it, but using that jutsu seemed almost deadly to him. Her eyes closed as she hung by a thread. The last thing he noticed was looking at two red and worried eyes while someone was calling his name. The next day, he woke up in the hospital bed. Apparently, during the chaos caused by Naruto's outburst, the daimyo and his guards managed to flee. While Naruto was unconscious, Izumi sealed the corpses of his companions in a scroll and, after passing his arm over his shoulders, took him to a nearby outpost in Konoha. A message was sent to the village, and they were sent to Ambu to escort the two genin back home. The location delayed the mission briefing by a week to give them time to mourn and recover. He was discharged from the hospital a few hours later because he had no physical injuries. The funeral was attended by the family of Tenma, Naruto, and Izumi. Yuki lived alone, so no one from his family came, except some classmates. It didn't rain during the funeral. It was a clear and sunny day, which contrasted with his feelings. Tenma's mother had not stopped crying, and, from time to time, she looked at them with a deep contempt in her eyes. Almost as if she despised them for being alive while her son was no longer. But he never got close to either of us. They did not speak to each other, did not even wonder about each other's newly awakened powers, and remained motionless. Even after everyone left. Finally, after hours of standing around doing nothing, the sun set, and everyone went on their way without looking back. Izumi's parents were worried, but they acted as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. As for Fugaku, he had no idea how to comfort anyone. Especially a girl who had her entire team brutally murdered in front of her eyes. The atmosphere around the dinner table that night was very tense. No one was saying a word. Even Sasuke, who used to talk while eating dinner, a habit that earned him a disapproving look from his mother every time, remained silent. She could see that something was bothering her older sister, but she didn't know what. After dinner, when Izumi stood up, her mother moved, hugged her. Seeing that his daughter did not return the hug, Mikoto frowned sadly and reluctantly released her. Izumi left the dishes in the sink and went out to the garden, sitting on the terrace. He leaned on the wooden pillar and gazed at the cold white light of the beautiful full moon. She was no longer a stranger to death. His first murder occurred just 4 months after he became a genius. But the death of her team affected her deeply. They were friends, weren't they? What is life? What is death? Why do you kill people? He was far from finding the answer to the question he had asked his father years ago. I hated killing, stealing someone's life, I really did. But isn't that what shinobi do? Breathing, contemplating the full moon, searching the star for the answers that would not reach her. Hearing footsteps, he looked over his shoulder and saw that his brother, Sasuke, was approaching. Nizan. Sasuke saw his face glow with a silvery glow in the moonlight. Feeling the need to comfort her older sister, although she did not know the reason, she did the only thing she remembered. That would make her happy. He sat down next to her and leaned his head on her lap, falling asleep while she fondly stroked his hair, almost unconsciously. Izumi lowered her gaze to her brother's sleeping face and thought to herself, will the day come when you will have these eyes too? The day when you know what sadness is. Her red eyes, with 2 tomones in them, filled with tears. She hugged her brother and poured them out in silence. She was not surprised to feel tiny arms wrapped around her. Naruto walked the busy streets with his hands in his pockets and his back hunched. He had no fixed destination. The murmur of the people enveloped him. He looked up with narrowed eyes. Full moon, and never realized he had ended up near a small ramen restaurant. She didn't feel like cooking that night, so she decided to do it. He entered the small shop and was instantly assaulted by an aroma that made his mouth water. Welcome to Ishiraku Ramen. What would you like to order? A middle-aged man and a girl his own age were standing behind the stall, bowing in greeting. It was noticeable that it was not a very popular store, despite the cozy atmosphere that the place conveyed. I refuse immediately. He sat down in the chair and clasped his hands on the seat, resting his chin on them. Naruto was confused. He had always felt at peace with nature. The trees used to resonate with her mood, but she always thought it was a figment of the imagination of her childish side. But the release of wood does not make sense. Of course, I knew Orochimaru. Since he was able to go to the library, he had been studying various things, including the famous and infamous shinobi. He realized that they had experimented with him as a child. He was probably taken from his parents, who were also killed. Because when they did blood tests, they didn't find any matches. Or his parents never existed, which was absurd. Or your samples were not available. But there was a third possibility that inclined him. Someone has manipulated their index. But who? At this point, the only one who could know his parents was Orochimaru, and he was out of reach, being a very wanted criminal. Suddenly, he heard a murmur and looked back, seeing a girl hiding behind the curtains. A little girl about 4 years old, with red hair pulled back in 2 pigtails and mustache marks. Realizing that the growl was probably coming from her stomach, he felt sorry for her. His appearance betrayed that he had not been eating enough. He pointed at her with his fingers and patted the place next to her. The girl seemed surprised and hesitated for a moment, but then she slowly approached the chair and sat down, looking at him sheepishly. He asked for 1 more miso soup. He's coming. The girl gradually got over her shyness and waited expectantly, swinging her legs and casting furtive glances at him. When she thought that he was not looking at her. Soon they made their orders and Naruto got a nice one. Surprise! I had been eating ramen for years and none of them came even remotely close to this one. His astonishment must have been reflected on his face because he could see the chef smiling proudly. She ended up eating 2 more bowls, and to her surprise, the girl managed to match it, bowl by bowl. He patted his visibly swollen belly and erupted shamelessly. He looked at her and sighed. They both left the stall, and he noticed how short she really was. "We're going to take you back to your house. Do you know where he is?" The girl lowered her gaze. "Do you have a place to spend the night?" She looked at him with narrowed eyes and smiled, somewhat embarrassed, but to him she seemed incredibly sad. "The lady at the pharmacy won't let me in anymore. For being a bad girl, but it wasn't me. First they called me Tomato." He started by saying in a low voice, but then his voice rose. Naruto was stunned and bit his lip. Why would Grandma do that? He thought it was ridiculous. Throwing a little girl out on the street to fend for herself. She heard what he said and looked at him with wide eyes. "Do you know Grandma? The other children said that she was very ill and that she would not come back." Naruto stopped in his tracks. "But I think she's just taking care of other children in another house, and she was always very kind to me." Naruto wiped his tears and looked at her. "Hey, Chibi, what's your name?" "Uzumaki Natsumi. And thanks for inviting me to ramen." It was delicious, you know." She smiled at him, and for a brief moment, everything ceased to matter as he looked at her. Her smile was so innocent and pure. What kind of monster was this new matron? She smiled a dozen times tonight. But he felt that it was the most sincere smile so far. "I'm Naruto. You can sleep in my apartment tonight, and we'll see what we can do tomorrow," he replied with a slight smile. "Really? And besides, your name is Fishka, yes?" "Yes, it's fish pie." "Are you happy now?" he said sadly. "What's wrong with people with your name? Do they not realize how great it is?" Siddled laughed. He sighed and kept walking. However, a faint smile was drawn on his face as he looked straight ahead. Things may be tough right now, but that doesn't mean they won't get better. You just have to persevere, and you will find your answers. Chapter 4. The kidnapping of Yuga Uzumaki Natsumi was born on the dreaded night of October 10th, 4 years ago. A night when many residents of Konoha lost a loved one. A night of fear and terror. In her first months of life, she was placed in an orphanage. The first insightful observation she made was that people would treat her differently than how they treated others. Maybe he had done something wrong without realizing it. It was a recurring thought, which he almost came to accept. When she turned 3, only one person did not look down on her, the elderly director of the orphanage. But soon, she stopped seeing her too. Rumors were circulating about his poor health. That made her feel sad. When the new matron arrived, her worst fears were confirmed. He looked at her with the same eyes as everyone else. Eyes full of hatred, disgust and fear. The other children learned from her. Obviously, if the new headmistress didn't like the weird girl, then something was wrong with the redhead. They started treating her the same. They never let her play with them. And there were 2 kids stealing her food, but when she complained to the principal, all she got was a sketch for lying. So he stopped complaining. The 3 children were emboldened when they saw this and began to make fun of her on a daily basis. And she also started taking it easy when it became an everyday thing. But one day, he got fed up. Hey, what's this?" said a plaintive voice. "Have you finished your lunch yet? Where is our share?" The last part was followed by a slight push on his shoulder. "Looks like he needs to learn his lesson," another childish voice said, followed by another, more abrupt shove. She stared them straight in the eyes and gritted her teeth. "I'm not giving you anything. That fool only gives me half of what everyone else gets," she screamed, and her face took on a slight reddish hue of anger. "Say it again, you weirdo." "I said it. I'm not giving you anything." He spat, gritting his teeth and pronouncing each word separately. The 2 children laughed. Look, she's turning red. Just like his stupid hair." One of them grabbed a handful of her hair. "It's like a tomato." Soon, all the children present began to laugh. She felt her cheeks burning with humiliation, but she concentrated on the 2 boys pulling her hair. "Tomato. Tomato? Tomato?" Banging the plate against the table with a clink, he pounced on them and grabbed the hand that was in his hair. I'm not a tomato. She screamed and bit the hand that was grabbing her by the hair. Hard. The boy cried and started hitting her in the face to make her stop. She bit even harder. Aruk. Stop it. Stop it. No. The other boy came to her aid and started kicking her. She left the first guy and knocked him down, throwing him to the ground and sitting on his chest, hitting him in the face. Punch I am, punch, no, punch a tomato. His face was bloody and his red hair was a mess. There were no tears in her eyes, just rage as she was breathing hard. Finally, she stopped hitting him, and the two boys, a little older than her, ran away in fright. He took a deep breath to calm down, but then he realized the silence that had invaded the entire room. He's a monster? The lady was right. The kids started whispering to each other. I'm afraid of her. They watched her cautiously, as if avoiding a wild animal, and slowly moved away when she passed by them. She didn't answer them as she crawled towards the bathroom. She climbed on a stool in front of the mirror to see herself, but she only saw a shattered little girl reflected. And tears stung in her eyes as her lower lip trembled. He looked pathetic. Animal, come here. The lady grabbed her by the forearm and pulled her roughly. It was inevitable, I knew it. That's why he never defended himself. I could see the two beaten children, standing next to the others, with an expression too smug to be bullies who had just been beaten up by a girl. It was obvious that they complained to the warden, and she finally found an excuse to kick her out. Don't come back. This is a place for kids, not for weirdos. He kicked her out and closed the door. The girl fell on her face to the ground, letting out a scream as she tried in vain to keep her balance with her hands to stop the fall. Her eyes were wide and trembling as she stood on her unsteady hands and knees. She clung to the hope that she would hear the door creak when it opened at any moment, that she would not be left alone outside to her fate. One long look at the closed door, and his hopes were dashed. He sat up and shook off his clothes. It was the only thing I was wearing at the time. The murmur of the crowd that had gathered to witness the uproar reached her ears as she stiffened. I didn't realize there were so many people. But they wouldn't come near her. To help her. No one was doing it. No one ever did. And his eyes. Look. It's that kid. Hate, don't look at her. You don't know what I could do. My weird teenager deserved what happened to him. What impudence. Walking around among us pretending to be a little girl. Aversion kicked the orphanage door in anger and turned around, not wanting to hear her murmurs. Running towards the only place where she knew no one would look at her with those eyes. Where no one would deny its existence. I wouldn't even insult her. The village of Konoha was immense, he realized. Sitting on the fourth peak of the mountain, she contemplated the village. The whole village seemed to mock her as she watched the seemingly perfect families. He saw the children playing and laughing sitting on their parents' shoulders. He saw the obvious love between them. Maybe her parents would have done the same to her if they had been together. Her eyes were closed by sleep. Maybe, and maybe it's not so bad for her to just let herself go. It will hurt, but only for a moment. Then she will finally be with her father, and no, she crushed that thought like an insect. And hurt herself, as tall as a 4-year-old could stand. He took a deep breath and screamed with all his might. My name is Uzumaki Natsumi, he said, raising his hand to the sun and looking through it, and I will make everyone recognize me someday. Remember that, you know. She smiled, beaming. Her previous mood had faded, and laughed to herself. She won't give up. She won't let them bend her. It felt good to do it. That night, he would meet Naruto for the first time, hurriedly looking for something to eat. He would call her and look at her with those worried eyes, completely different from the ones she was used to. And I would ask him the most important question. Hey, Chibi, what's your name? He actually smiled for the first time in his life. She had finally found someone who accepted her as she was. He made her feel that she was not the monster or the freak, but Uzumaki Natsumi. And thanks for inviting me to eat ramen. It was delicious, you know. She wanted to cry with pure joy for the first time, but she narrowed her eyes as much as she could and gave him a wide smile. Then the Okage scratched his grizzled beard. This masked man killed your team, Honen Minazuki Yuki and Geninizumo Tenma. And you, Naruto, found out that you can use the wooden style, and Izumi woke up her Sharingan, summed up the Okage. Yes, Okage-sama? They said in unison, in a voice devoid of emotion. There was a moment of silence while the Okage took a puff on his pipe. I am deeply sorry for your loss. Like Okage, it hurts me a lot when one of my own dies. I hope you two are okay. It was a real tragedy, and we will investigate it thoroughly. Breathing warily. But let's move on to other matters. We cannot allow the news to spread that Konoha has two users of wood techniques until at least you reach the rank of Honen. The release of wood was not a simple genetic inheritance. If the word got out that the limit of the genetic inheritance of the first Kage still existed, chaos would break out among the other nations. The leaders would send assassins after Naruto to kill him before he reached his full potential. The current peace was precarious at best. Naruto looked at him, surprised. Is there another one? I know what you must be thinking, and yes, it's true. I think they already know each other a little. From what I've been told, he managed to awaken their affinity quite early, she said. For the upcoming exams, Chunin, we will have him as the third member of your team. I will arrange for one of my Honen to act as your squad leader for the time being. And I have no doubt that both will be successful. Finally, he smiled. We won't let you down, Okage-sama. All right, you can leave now. He dismissed them and looked at their papers sadly. Izumi looked at Naruto and arched an eyebrow when she saw that he didn't move. He shook his head. She shrugged her shoulders slightly and left the office, leaving him alone. You have something else to say. He didn't look up from his desk at the conclusion. Yes, Okage-sama. I can speak with freedom, granted. Yesterday, I found a little girl named Uzumaki Natsumi. Irison tensed when she heard the name, but nothing more. The director prevented him from entering the orphanage, and he had nowhere to sleep that night. The Okage squeezed his papers tightly when he heard it. I offered him shelter in my apartment for the night. However, now I don't know what to do. I don't consider myself capable of taking care of a girl. She is waiting on the other side of the door at this very moment. Irison was saddened to hear about this, but was not surprised. He was afraid that information about his condition as a Hinshiriki would leak out and that the situation would reach this extreme. However, he had faith in his people, in their will to fire. But it seems that his faith was poorly deposited. He frowned. The majority of the population of Konoha was hostile to him. She couldn't trust anyone to kill her in her sleep if she assigned a guardian. The only thing I could do now was to give Natsumi her own apartment, and that his Imbula protected from the shadows. Well, first, and have him come in, he told his receptionist quietly. Natsumi timidly poked her head out of the door and looked around. Seeing an old man and Naruto talking, he approached him. She grabbed him by the hem of his shirt and hid behind his legs. I'll talk to her and take care of the rest. You can leave. Yes, Okage-sama. He bowed and gave her a reassuring smile before leaving. Later that evening, while taking a walk in the market area, he noticed something. He was being followed. Naruto made his way through the crowd, entered different shops, and wandered around the area for a while. He was still being followed. Realizing that he could not get rid of them easily, he decided to confront them. He reached a clearing, and, before he could call them, he was alerted by the unmistakable signs of the Shunsin. Adopting a defensive posture, with his right hand suspended over his fanny pack, he noticed that the person following him was an Ambu. Well, at least it looked like an Ambo, apart from the mask without face. Ambu ninjas wear masks with animal faces, I knew that much. Genin Naruto, Danzo-sama wishes to meet with you. You should be at this address in 30 minutes, he handed her a piece of paper. Don't keep him waiting. Another Shunsin, and he disappeared. Naruto checked the address and sighed. Why would a former council counselor want to meet with him? Naruto arrived at the place, but noticed that no one was there. It looked like an old training camp. A large area for practicing combats, with weights, training poles, and other equipment. It was located underground and had rough stone walls. Despite its ancient appearance, it was evident that someone was still using this training ground. You must be more attentive to your surroundings if I want to teach you, young shinobi. A hoarse old man's voice echoed behind her. Danzo had been watching him since Naruto's arrival, hiding in the shadows and minimizing his presence. He was shocked when Hiruzen confronted him later that day. He was informed that young ninja in front of him had shown potential to use the wooden style, even more skillfully than his other student. Although he did not doubt the words of the Hokage, because he had no reason to lie, he was still skeptical. Hiruzen allowed him to get away with many things, such as using Senhua Shirama's personal scrolls for his techniques, when he wanted to train his other student in the wood style. So now, I had to return the favor by teaching this young genin. Actually, it wasn't a bad thing. He was in favor of strengthening the Konoha shinobi, as long as they didn't become too powerful for him to control. After all, when he becomes Hokage, he will not be able to allow anyone to be his equal, or worse, to be better than him. Naruto turned around and relaxed at the sight of him. He bowed as usual. "Dear old man Danzo-san." Danzo hit the ground with his cane. "I must teach you to hone your skills in releasing wood and your instincts, as I have been informed." Danzo kept his penetrating gaze on him. "For the next 4 years, we will train here, on a daily basis. And I recommend that you take these years seriously. I will not waste my time with someone who is not motivated to learn." Naruto was surprised, but he thought it was for the best. However, I was still a little suspicious of the one-eyed old man. When he met Fugaku, he was warned to stay away from him. Fugaku did not give many details, but he did not hold the old councilman in high esteem. There was no doubt about that. "I'm grateful. I almost killed myself when I woke up the limit of my lineage. I don't want this gift of mine to go to waste." His tone was respectful and serene. "You must know my other student." Danzo made a subtle gesture with his hand, and someone got down on his knees in front of them. "Get up, Kino." "Danzo-sama." The newcomer was wearing an old-style italit, reminiscent of the uniform of Senjudo Birama and Ambu. But he wasn't wearing a mask. "Tenzo." Tenzo Baraquino seemed irritated for a moment, but then he returned to his impassive mask. "Kino will be your third team member when you take the Chunin exams. At the end of this year in the village of Kumogakure." Naruto looked at him in surprise. "You must show the whole world the power of Konoha. Konoha belongs to the top of the Big Five nations. It's about time they realized. Unfortunately, you do not have permission to use the wood release yet. Although Kino masters this element in greater depth, since she has been training longer than you do not. If you rely on a skill that you have not mastered, it will cause you more harm than good." Naruto nodded, accepting the conditions and the logic. He didn't think he was going to use that ability anytime soon, given that the last time he used it he almost died. "You can go now. He'll be back here at the same time tomorrow." It was already dark when Naruto arrived home. Tenzo had left earlier with his teacher. The older boy didn't even look at her. To tell the truth, I was excited about this new training. He and Izumi were the same, so this should give him an advantage. But of course, his Sharingan was another factor that would even things out. She was very good even without him. He couldn't imagine how strong he would become once he mastered his eyes. But that was the reason they were rivals. Their skills were practically identical, but they pushed each other to improve. He doubted that there was a genin capable of defeating any of them. He has not yet spoken to her after the death of his companions. Even this morning, they crossed glances fleetingly. He noticed that something had changed in her. Somehow, her eyes, once warm, now seemed cold. She remembered how she reacted when her classmates died, and it was obvious that his death had affected her more than him. He'll have to check on her later. He noticed something by his door, or rather, someone. Natsumi. What happened? She was standing outside her door, dressed in new clothes. "The old Hokage is great. He even told me that I can stay next door, in the same building as you, and that I won't even have to pay." until I become a formidable ninja." Meanwhile, Naruto looked at her with increasing horror, the old man. And he covered her mouth with his hand. He looked around. "No. Don't call him old. It is the place of our village. The most respected and strongest person in the whole village. If someone surprises you by calling him old, but he says he doesn't care at all. I swear," he said quickly, not wanting to cause trouble. But something stuck in his mind, and tell me, is what you said true? That old man is the strongest, and that everyone respects him? Of course. It is the Hokage that has reigned the longest in our village. He regained his title after the fourth Hokage killed the Kyuubi, but lost his life in the battle. Her eyes were bright as stars as she looked at him. "Can I become an Hokage too?" "I can." "Well," he said, taking his hand to his chin, "maybe you should ask the Hokage-sama the next time you see him. After all, he is the most appropriate person to talk about this with." Natsumiya felt wisely. What is appropriate? Well, and it seems that they would have to work in their language. Yuga and Nata was the sole heiress of the noble Yuguga clan. A clan known for its unique lineage boundary, the Vyakugan. The Vyakugan I was feared in all nations for the great visual acuity it granted to its wearers, including an almost 360-degree field of vision, the ability to see through objects, and telescopic vision. Its power varied from one user to another. The Yuga clan had two branches, the main and the secondary. And Nata was born in the main branch, the daughter of Yuga Yasi and Yuga Itomi. Her mother died when she was a baby, so Yasi had to raise her alone. Yasi, devastated by the pain of the loss of his wife, decided to be the best father for his daughter. He began to train his daughter, together with his nephew, in the art of the soft fist, and was pleased to note that they were both very talented. Neji more than Hinata, but he still felt immensely proud of the two of them. Of course I shouldn't show emotions, so I never praised them too much. Therefore, she was not as shy as some people painted her. His first cousin, Yuganei, was the son of Izashi, Yashi's younger twin, and thus, he was appointed a member of the branch at the age of 3. Still, he loved his younger cousin very much. His father had told him that an older brother's duty is to protect. She was his younger sister, and he would follow that advice to the letter. Today was Hinata's 4th birthday, and the Yuga clan was celebrating his heiress with a party. Numerous influential personalities and families were invited, with the exception of the Uchiha. This was mainly due to the growing tensions between the Uchiha and the village, as well as to their own rivalry. The Hokage also briefly attended the banquet, but had to leave hurriedly due to an important meeting with a Kumo envoy. The Yuga clan's grounds were anything but simple. If someone saw them, it would not be unreasonable to think that they had traveled back in time. Old-style buildings with fish ponds and small gardens. It was, without a doubt, a sight worth seeing. 5-year-old Neji was standing next to her father, holding his hand. I watched from a distance how Hinata received various gifts and congratulations. Neji smiled at the sight of his sister's face, which radiated happiness and a slight nervousness. He looked at his hands and clenched his fist, promising himself that he would take care of himself. I will protect that smile as long as I have these hands. Soon it was dark and the celebration was over. All the guests had returned to their homes, and everyone in the mansion and Yuga were sleeping. Everyone except Neji, of course. I couldn't sleep because my stomach was swollen. Probably because of all the sweets I had eaten that day. But what could I do? He loved sweets. He thought he heard a noise from outside, but he attributed it to someone from the clan. Obviously, no one would be so foolish as to infiltrate one of the 4 noble clans of Konoha. He heard something again and went on alert. He got up quietly and went to where the noise was coming from. Neji left the mansion, but he didn't see anyone. He was about to activate his Yakugan when something, or rather someone, fell on him with such force that he knocked the 5-year-old unconscious instantly. Kumo's shinobi sighed with relief. He was almost caught. If the boy had seen it, it would certainly have complicated things for him. He adjusted the bag that moved under his arm and left the clan grounds, trying to be as quiet as possible. So Kumo offers a peace treaty. It sounds too good to be true, considering Torakage's well-known dislike of Konoha. The envoy of Kumo was writhing under the gaze of the Hokage. In reality, his mission was only to buy time for his partner to kidnap the heiress Itka and then manage to get out of trouble. I had the impression that the Hokage was old and easy to fool. I didn't think I was going to face Sarutobi and Ruzen Shimura Danzo. Danzo was not an easy man to deceive, far from it. He was cold, calculating, and obsessively loyal to Konoha. Or at least, to his vision of how Konoha should be. After their defeat in the last war against Namikaze Minato, they had suffered greatly. They couldn't be sure, but this man was even more ruthless than usual. Almost as if he was taking his anger out on something else. He was fighting like a possessed man. The current Reikage there was brutally beaten. Until I'm on my knees. And then Minato humiliated him by sparing his life. If only for some macabre fun. The Reikage had fled with his tail between his legs. But he promised to take revenge. Unfortunately, Minato was dead, without any relatives that he knew of. What better way to get revenge, and at the same time, get a valuable resource for your village? He took advantage of the pacifism of the Third Cage to sign a peace treaty. And he was right to do it. Unfortunately, he also forgot to take into account the shadow of that man. The shinobi of darkness, Shimura Danzo. Whatever the plan of your Reikage, we have nothing to do with it. Konoha will rise as the best of the 5 nations, and Kumo and Iwa will be nothing but supporting characters. Danzo said in an arrogant voice, not taking his eyes off the man in front of him. Although I wish for peace, and do not share exactly the same ideas as my old friend Danzo teased, provoking a smile, I must admit that the timing chosen for this proposal is somewhat suspicious. And their conditions are very vague. Kumo's envoy gritted his teeth and pretended to be upset. I was sure that I had already gained enough time. He made a bow. I'll say goodbye then, Okage-san, Shimura-san. I wish you good health. After the envoy left hurriedly, Irizen looked at his rival and nodded. That fool, Reikage, is up to something nefarious. You'd better be careful. Bloodhound, said a masked man with gray hair who appeared in front of them, kneeling down. Follow him and make sure he doesn't stray too far. Yes, Okage-sama. After the ambush left, Danzo looked Irizen in the eyes and said, that boy, Naruto, is extraordinary. Its affinity with the release of wood is so powerful that I dare say it could become an even greater resource than our Shadai Mesama. Kinoeni approaches him. He was a bit rough, but I've been helping him develop his senses for the last 3 months. Irizen concealed his surprise quite well. To tell the truth, I had assigned Tsumi as Naruto's neighbor for several reasons. The first was that the guy clearly did not hold a grudge against her. He might change his mind when he finds out about his situation, and he would be very disappointed if that happened. So, the girl had someone to turn to if she needed anything. Irizen would be lying if she said she didn't like him. She was always a pleasure to talk to, and recently, the girl had expressed her desire to become Hokage. He had chuckled to himself when she said that. Of course, his reasons were childish, but he had character. Maybe I could really pull it off. Who knows? The second reason was to keep an eye on Naruto, using the same Zambu who guarded Natsumi. She didn't question the boy's loyalty, but she was afraid that his ideals would change after spending so much time with Danzo. That wouldn't be right. He took a risk by asking Danzo to train the boy. He thought it was for the best. Danzo had already taught a student the technique of releasing wood, and Irizen had allowed him studying the scrolls of his former teacher. And if it helped the next generation get stronger, and he was willing to take risks. I'm sure you're joking. Esirama-sama was exceptional. If the boy has even more potential than he does, then I'm intrigued by his lineage. It was a pity we couldn't find out the last time we tried, when he was found. Maybe we should try again. Danzo thought for a while. I'll look into it, he said, standing up and tapping his cane, and I'm not your old friend. Danzo left, and Irizen smiled to himself. Some things never change. Naruto looked around frantically as he sank into quicksand. I couldn't get out, no matter how hard I tried. He started to struggle, but it only made things worse. Then, he calmed down. Concentrating on her dense chakra, she invoked it. The chakra flowed through its spirals like a water pipe about to burst. And he let it all out all at once. K. He fell on his back into the clearing where he was training, and blinked. Okay, that. It was faster than last time, but you need to be faster and use less chakra. You would die 10 times if I wanted to kill you. Or if by any chance you survived, you would attract all the shinobi around. He had asked his mentor for help against the Sharingan, and Shisui saw no reason to deny. I had already taught them both the Shunsin. He was even able to annoy Izumi in this way, when he will certainly notice Naruto's resistance to his eye. It'll be fun. He rubbed his hands together. Why is that? Why are you laughing like that? Naruto looked at him strangely. His laughter was somewhat disturbing. Oh, nothing, he said absently. I was just thinking about how to annoy Izumi and Sasuke. It's a lot of fun to tease that kid. He clings to his sister like a human, and never has anything nice to say to me, so I'm sorry if I don't consider him funny. Well, he'll get over it. He is simply jealous that you have his dear sister just for you all the time. He banged her in the ribs. Don't do that. He stopped abruptly. Do you hear that sound? Shisui's face turned serious, and he nodded. They both jumped into the trees and erased his presence. Kumo's shinobi ran as fast as he could, with a bag that resisted falling under his arm. He supposed he should have knocked out the unbearable brat, but he was in such a hurry that he didn't even bother to do it. He stopped at a clearing, looked around, and then opened the sack. Okay, brat. Go to sleep now, ha. As soon as he opened it, and Nada jumped up with an angry expression, with her Yakugan activated, and quickly delivered a gentle fist bump to the shinobi's groin. The shinobi fell to his knees, and his vision blurred, as he held up his tattered ornaments. He became enraged and got up trembling. You stupid bitch! He was about to sketch Inada, who was now a little scared, with the forgotten fury in front of his enraged enemy. And he raised his hand. The fight ended when a cradle and pierced his hand. Naruto fell to the ground and kicked him in the feet, hitting the still very disoriented shinobi with enough force to knock him unconscious. He looked around to comfort the young woman when he saw her looking at him with a strange expression. Her eyes were shining, bright with admiration as she beheld her savior, his thin, moonlit face, his wild blonde mane, and his violet eyes. Of course, I had heard stories about princes rescuing princesses. And he had finally found his soul mate. It had to be like this. She was about to thank her savior and ask for his name when they heard a rustling among the leaves. Another Kumo shinobi came out from among the bushes. I had been running for a while, avoiding the downtown area. That was the place where they had left, but he realized that something was wrong. His partner was lying on the floor, unconscious, still holding his groin. And 2 brats were standing over him. One of them was his goal. This was bad. Perhaps if he retires now and proclaims that the man acted on his own, he will still be fine. He started walking backwards, but found something blocking his way. The masked Ambo with the dog mask was standing in his way. Even with the mask on, he could make out her expression of smugness. Are you going somewhere? Kumo Shinobi-san said, waving his hand in a mocking greeting. Kumo's envoy knew that his chances were slim. He gritted his teeth and ran towards the only exit left. He didn't get very far before Shisui fell in front of him. We haven't even had the pleasure of meeting you. You're not leaving without saying goodbye, are you? Shisui smiled after saying that. The shinobi looked around, realized that he was surrounded, and accepted his defeat. He fell to his knees and raised his hands. I give up. At that time, it was the only way I could survive. Well, even if he manages to return home safe and sound, the wreckage will certainly kill him. Yuga was already angry. No, that would be wrong. Yugas were not supposed to show emotions. But somehow, you could see the icy fury etched on his face. Although he had never shown affection to his daughter, Yasi truly loved her, to the point that he would kill anyone in order to protect her. The attempted kidnapping of Hinata and the attack on her nephew tormented him deeply. Yasi wanted blood. His brother Izasi was not feeling better. But sometimes, people don't get what they want. However, there was one thing he was especially proud of about his daughter. The kidnapper would never have children again. And so, of course, he flashed a smile when no one was watching, and made sure to stroke his daughter's head. Neji was no better, and was sulking about not being able to protect his cousin. But after telling him that he had no chance against a skilled honey in direct combat, he calmed down a bit. At least his sister was safe. They were in front of the Okage. Yashi had specially called Naruto at his request, as Hinata, still somewhat dazed, had recognized him only by his appearance. Yashi wasn't sure why his daughter had used the word prince, but he would let it go. "I, Yuga Yashi, am indebted to you," he said, bowing. Even if my daughter had managed to distract him for a while, he would certainly have beaten her. If you ever need anything, remember that the Hyuga have your back. Naruto scratched the back of his neck and smiled shyly. Irison was looking at him with an amused smile. It wasn't every day that the Hyuga clan leader was seen like this. "Please stand up. A man of your stature shouldn't take a bow, Yashi-sama. I did what anyone would have done in my place." His tone was respectful. "In any case, I am very grateful to you." Naruto nodded respectfully. A shinobi fell in front of them, heading for Sarutobi. "Okage-sama, our investigation and training experts have made them confess to their crimes. The official statements are here." He pointed to the folder in his hand. "Excellent," exclaimed Irison. "Konoha will now have a huge political advantage over Kumo. They will not be able to attack us without any provocation on our part, but we already have reasons to do so. However, I will pressure the Reikikage to sign a peace treaty on our terms by showing him this statement." Yasi's mood was noticeably opened by not receiving any punishment. Apparently, infertility was the only punishment she was going to get. 2 days later, in the village of Kumogakyure, a muscular, dark-skinned man was aggressively lifting his weights, while watching his 2 ninjas squirm. And he said in a threatening voice, "Not only have you failed, but now Konoha has an advantage over us. Damn it." He threw his office desk out of the window with one punch. "I will show you in the Chunin exams how you will not lose on your land." Chapter 5, Marzana's Obsessions. "Naru, why did everyone leave?" "I don't know. It's been 4 months since Natsumi moved into the apartment next door, but little by little, all the residents, except him, have been leaving. For some reason I couldn't understand, people tended to avoid her. Most of the adults were simply looking at her from afar, with various expressions on their faces, from disgust to fear. Naruto